pops on, there we go. Just hit got it on your screens there, and we'll get started.
Perfect.
So that's the first thing. Welcome to the 1776 Syndicate call. Absolutely a pleasure to have you here. Those of you who will be watching this online at a later date, you won't be disappointed. A couple of ground rules before we get started. Make sure that your mute is on so that we won't have background interruptions, and we'll be able to unmute you when we go to question and answer. Please don't record the call. This is something you can review the recordings on the membership portion of the 1776 Syndicate website. And we just remind everyone that we do practice the rules of civil discourse, Robert's Rule of Order, and all the meetings that you go to. So keep it clean, keep it professional. Doesn't mean we can't be real. It just means that we're going to be paying attention to civility. We've not had to kick anybody out yet, but Jim and I are eager to find the first scoundrel who crosses us. All right, so I'm going to hit some news items probably toward the end if we have a few minutes. There's so much going on. I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on that, but I do want to quickly review. I know it's not on the back end of our site yet, but our call last week was with Braxton Mitchell, state legislator, I believe the second youngest in the country. And it was a phenomenal interview. And for those of us who are, I don't want to say over the hill, but older than most, it's really refreshing to see that we do have the caliber of people we need willing to go into government service that can and will take our charge, our founding fathers' charge forward. And it's so encouraging. And that's a meeting worth going back to review. Send your friends to it, because it really does give all of us hope. It's inspiring when you can be inspired by that younger generation who are out doing the things that now I, in hindsight, wish I was doing when I was younger. So never too late, but definitely an inspiring session last week. So thanks, Jim, for getting him on. He was a great guest. And then on the opposite end of that, we had Representative Fuller, which never disappoints. And it's just such a nice mix to go all the way through. And then we've also had some others. I'm so excited tonight to introduce Bruce Cartwright. And I know you got your email, so you know that he's retired special agent with the FBI, and he was a special investigator, worked with firearms, a firearms instructor, SWAT medic, FBI legal advisor. I know he was a lawyer and a district attorney, practicing assistant district attorney at one time. He comes with a plethora of source materials. He was in before it became the swamp, I believe. So it'll be interesting to hear his take on that. And I know your resume is so extensive, Bruce, that I do hope you share a little bit more of that with us. Bruce also a firearms instructor, and he owns SAC Tactical, and the website in the chat is there. Please take note of that. And if you want to take advantage of any of that in the future, you'll have all the contact information you need to get a hold of Bruce after. The reason I asked Bruce on tonight, my subject topic was, and I wanted to get this right, getting people involved at the local level. And I knew of the Tiger team in Lake County in Montana here. And I'd heard of it and their success and what they were doing. And people wanted to duplicate that success. They wanted to, start getting things going like that. And so it was a real pleasure when I ran into Bruce's son, and he was telling me, yeah, well, my dad's a member of, he sounds like he's got a lot of the same ideals you do. He's a member of the Tiger team. And I said, I know what the Tiger team is. What's your dad's contact information? So it was your son, Will, that connected us, Bruce, and I'm really glad he did. But the Tiger team is a go-to, and I really hope you spend some time explaining the way you did to me, Bruce, just in nuts and bolts terms, how you got that whole thing started, And that really is getting people involved at the local level. So that's the topic, but take us anywhere you want to go. What we want to do is just empower and inspire people, teach and train them how to get involved in local politics and do it effectively. And that's something you've been able to do with your team down there, that if we could duplicate that across the country, we would have this dialed in, and that's the goal. So Bruce, the floor is yours.
All right. First off, thanks to 1776 Syndicate and everybody associated for hosting me. Thanks to the viewers this evening for allowing me to come into your homes and take a little bit of your time. I know our time's all valuable, so I try to keep my comments very pointed and on focus. I struggle at self-promotion. I always ascribe to the concept of, in my world, what was called the quiet professional. You didn't talk much about yourself. You just, you figured your missions and your successes would speak for themselves. That said, if there's anything I can help you with or any questions you have about my background, when we hit the Q&A portion, sound off. I will tell you from a philosophical point of view, that I think the only dumb question or stupid question is the one that doesn't get asked. Typically what I find is people on your right and left will be sitting there and you ask a question because people are not comfortable questioning things. And then afterwards you hit a break or something, somebody sitting beside you says, hey, I was thinking about that too. So sound off. The whole point of all of these podcasts and everything else is to convey information. The better we do that, the better we can accomplish whatever our missions are. So with that intro, how did I get involved in Republican politics? Correction, how did I get in conservative Republican politics? There's a difference. I've been a lifelong Republican, always been a bit of a newsie. My last billet in the Bureau was on something called Field Intelligence Group. I had to figure out tomorrow's problems today. And so as much as I had been a news junkie, if you will, I became an inveterate news reader, always looking at what's going on, trying to figure out what the issues are going to be tomorrow. When I retired, I still, my goal for retirement was to be fat, happy, and dumb, teach a little bit, spend time with family, enjoy Montana, and be left the hell alone. And I got up on November 4th and realized that was all completely dashed. What I saw was very, very much a concern to me. And so it ground on me, it bugged me, and it led me to Lake County Republican Central Committee. And long story short, it involved getting invited to participate in the Tiger Team. So in a short definition, what is the Tiger Team? The Tiger Team is a group of doers in the Republican Party in Lake County. These are the people that when you need to accomplish a mission, they will get it done for you. And at the risk of offending anybody, in any organization, you will find what has been my experience is something called the 10-80-10 rule. 10% of the people are not really helpful and may actively work against you. 80% of the people are good folks that will do good work, but are not as necessarily motivated attack a problem. And then there's 10% that are just stamping mad about something and, hey, we got to fix this. And they get together and they're the ones that get tasked with doing a lot of these things. So with that in mind, the Tiger Team was formed by the current Lake County Republican Central Committee Chairman, Tracy Sharp. Tracy's a retired lieutenant colonel in the Air Force. He flew big jets around, got the 100-pound brain thing going because he was, got the engineer flying B-52s, doing all sorts of cool stuff. Never told me if he did any barrel rolls in any, but whatever. And Tracy realized that there was an issue, that we needed to get a bunch of things accomplished in short order. What the Tiger Team is not, is we are not an executive committee for the Central Committee. We are essentially the operations arm of the Central Committee. If the Central Committee says we want to create ads for the upcoming election, we're the guys and gals that figure out how to do that. One of the things we're looking at doing, and I may come ping you, Rod and Jim, about this, is we are thinking about how do we get a podcast up? Because what we're seeing is that there's a significant number of issues that if people know about them, they will be motivated to act on them. And we are not doing a good enough job of educating people and getting that message out. So at any rate, that was the Tiger team. That's what our mission was, or that's what the definition is. Last year in 2021, we had certain set definable goals. Number one, we have 44 precinct captain seats in Lake County. We had approximately 30% of them filled by the end of, and one of our missions was to fill at 100% rate every precinct captain position in Lake County. We are currently at, I think, 68%. Didn't make the numbers, but we more than doubled the number of precinct captains we have. Why is that important? Because precinct captains are the lifeblood of these parties. If you want to change the direction of a party, you need to get the votes into precinct captain positions. These are the folks that vote on our resolutions for you. These are the people that will do work with the local voters. There's a myriad of numbers and reasons why you want to do this. There is a gentleman down in Arizona that has written a book about this and basically said, if you control the precinct captains, you can. That's what we're aiming to do. The second mission we had was to revamp and stand up a new website. We have done that. It's still undergoing a little bit of tweaking, but one of our senior members of the Tiger team, who's 80 years old, who's a retired Navy lieutenant, was Naval Academy grad. I was busy with a bunch of things on the Tiger team, and Frank said, look left, look right, said, nobody's doing this, so I'll do it. He's 80 years old, and God bless him, could barely turn on a computer and went from that to standing up a really nice website. Why is the website important? It's the basis for how we're going to communicate to people. My legislative committee, we just got done drafting a resolution that we want to have hopefully get adopted by our central committee, talking about election integrity. Well, once it's adopted, a copy of that in PDF form is going to go up on a website. That will be a model, so that if you call me, Devin, if you call me and say, hey, Bruce, how do we do this resolution address? You pick it up and you say, oh, you adopt it, you do it, and we move on. We are looking to do more with that. The other thing we did is, in addition to revamping the website, we realized that we have to conduct significant training for our precinct captains. So we prepared an actual physical precinct captain handbook. We have reduced writing, both copy and digital format. I think we're going to get that up on the website, but it's available to other Republican Central committees. And it basically says, hey, welcome, you're the new precinct captain. This is what you got to do. And here's how to do it. And here's a list of resources. Because a year and a half ago, if you'd have said, and I was a political junkie, hey, Bruce, who's your local representative? I'd have looked at you like you had a tree trunk growing around your head. I don't know. And all of a sudden now you've got to know those things. So we make it easy for people to help us. The next mission we had was to change our bylaws. And this crucial point, bear with me, but the bylaw change was important because we want to be able to vet and endorse candidates. For far too long, the Republican Party has followed the mantra that Ronald Reagan said, never speak ill of another Republican. And what has that gotten us? And that is rhinos, and it's a problem. So we've changed the rules. We're in the process of standing up a vetting committee down in Lake County. So that was one of the other things we did. another mission was to stand up a legislative committee, and apparently when they asked for volunteers, I didn't step back fast. I'm the chairman of that. We have gotten significant help from some of our members on that. So the point of all this is, when I talk about those missions, why do we do that? If you look at the current state of the country, it's overwhelming. And everybody we talk to tells us the same two things. Number one is, I feel completely isolated. Am I the only person that feels this way? And number two, what can I do about it? So knowing that, we use that as a springboard, and we tell people, no, you're not isolated. You're not crazy. People are upset about these issues, and we are doing something about it. And then you hand them a task list and say, here's some of the stuff you can get involved with and help us with. You get some buy-in that way. But what it really does, by adopting a mission, a list of missions that you have to accomplish, it gives you a task, it gives you a purpose. And when you work through those at the end of the year, you're doing a couple of things. One, you're accomplishing your mission, but number two, it dovetails with the old joke about, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. Well, this is how you start chewing this elephant. This is how we start attacking the problems. So we have got a list of those things that we are going to deal with, a list of taskings or missions for 2022. One of them is standing up the vetting committee. Number two, getting a list of vetting questions that we can use. Number three, we're looking at doing interviews of political candidates. And quite frankly, the podcast format is a great way to do this, to sit people down, to talk to them and really get to know them. It's not some canned 30-second thing that some politician can just say and blow off. You really get to know what someone's thinking. So we're looking at doing that. Any rate, we make sure we meet once a week with the Tiger team. We get a budget from the Central Committee, but again, we're not the executives. We look for and try to recruit people that are helpful. We had, I was doing with one of my legislative committee guys, Jim Gamolka, a meeting, and we were talking about election integrity. And two people came up and started talking to us after the meeting, and they're a really nice couple. And I mentioned, I said, hey, where are you guys from? And they're like, over in the Swan Valley. I said, really? That's cool. And they knew their district, and I think they're from Swan 1. Well, we didn't have any precinct captains. Hey, would you consider being a precinct captain for us? Yeah. And you put them in and you plug them in. A lot of times we're finding is people are willing to do stuff, but they need to be asked. So don't be afraid to ask people for help. You know, hey, listen, Jim, I know you're an expert in this area. I need you to give me a hand with this, and ask. You got to do stuff like that. The other thing I will tell you that we do is we meet every week. There's a local law office that has a partner in a law firm who has been kind enough to allow us to use his conference room. So from Wednesday morning, from 9 supposedly to 11, usually it ends up being closer to noon, we typically get together and we solve the world's problems. We try to stay pretty much on track because ideas work best when they're allowed to percolate up through the bottom. I will tell you that as we get bigger, the Tiger team is not a public, and it is, you need to restrict it to people that are actually going to do stuff. A lot of people say, hey, I want to be part of that. And it's great on a resume, but when you really need something done, they're not getting it done. So we tend to look at that. And we try to encourage that. We try to make sure everybody's got a voice and they're able to talk about things and explain things and talk about the things that concern them. And what you find is, number one, we're almost all of like mind. We all hear or share the same concerns. And it's good to get that out. And that said, you don't want your meetings to turn into a gripe fest. So we make sure whenever I've run them in Tracy's absence or when Tracy's doing them, we have an agenda and here's what we're trying to accomplish. The agenda for this Wednesday is vetting. What else was there? Something else. There's 3 or 4 other things, fundraising and a couple other things. You need to look at that and use that as a way to springboard into things. You have to find your work, plan your work your plan, and you got to get people that are dedicated to doing it. Now, I will tell you the other thing that we do that is sadly lacking in a lot of places is we do after action reports. We recently had to pick a county commissioner. One of our county commissioners, Dave Stipe, fortunately decided to retire because he was in bad shape with cancer. So it fell to the Republican Central Committee to pick a list of nominees for the commissioners. Tracy looked at me and another guy, Steve Dennison, and said, you guys want to help me with this? And again, yeah, we're doing it. And we go through the whole process. We got a great selection. Steve Stanley's one of the people that was on our list. He was selected by the commissioners and doing great work. Afterwards, I sat down and wrote a briefing on that as to how that's done. And things we would do a little differently. So that if you guys up in Flathead say, hey, we're confronted with a similar situation, there ought to be a way for you to get a document that you can look at and say, oh, this has been done before. So we have a library of that. We're starting to create that. But the after action part of this is, and it's what's really, really crucial, and people have a problem doing this for some reason. You got to look at what you did right. You got to look at what you did wrong. You got to take your emotion out of it. And you got to say, hey, this didn't work too well. Okay, well, then don't do it again. And how do we plan better in the future? And I've had that happen to me. There was a time when I was a new agent. I was executing a search warrant with my training agent and a number of other agents. We breached the building. We entered the building. Afterwards, my training agent grabs me by the stacking swivel shirt collar and says, hey, I want to talk to you. Okay, what do you got to tell me? And he says, did you look through the crack in the door when you went in the door? I'm like, he knew me well enough. I'm like, no. He's like, then you walk past the known danger area. Don't ever do that again. And then he gave me homework. He said, I want you to go to Quantico when you're down there next time, and I want you to go to Hogan's Alley, and I want you to look above the door transoms when you go into this place and see if you see any boot marks up there. I didn't know what he was talking about. So I went and I did it. And then we had another chat. And the point is, people could hide in a bunch of places, and I was not on top of that. And I learned from that mistake, and it made me a better agent. And that process is something that we have to go through when we're doing stuff. The other reason is, what's the definition of insanity? Continuing to engage in a pattern of behavior, the same pattern of behavior, expecting a different result. That's insanity. You can't do that. So we push that pretty hard. We are on a constant search for new people to help us. And you got to get creative with it. One of our guys on the Tiger team, we need a couple of precinct captains down in the southern end of the county near Arley. He walked into some taxidermy shop and is talking to the guy. Apparently this is one of those people, it's like the Cheers bar in Boston. Everybody knows this dude. Okay, go talk to him. Who do we talk to find potential precinct captains? Yeah, and we're always doing that. So you have to put the word out. You have to cultivate relationships with all of these people. And I will tell you, one of the cool things about Montana is it's a small state. When I was back east in Virginia, Pennsylvania, you really didn't have, you rarely had any contact with federal legislators. And certainly when I was in the Bureau, it was, that was handled by supervisors. You just didn't do that. In Montana, I can tell you, I talked to Linda Rexton Joe Reed, Mark Nolan, Greg Hertz, fairly frequently. They're great people. And because this is such a small state, you can actually get to know these folks. So it's important. Build all these relationships, talk to people. And like Rod said when we started this, the rules of civility are important, polite and professional. When you're trying to recruit people to do stuff for you legislatively, you're not going to win every battle. That's okay, as long as you win the important ones. And so that's one of the things that we work towards all the time. I'm trying to think about some other things. The other things that we do with the Tiger team, and we cover everything. We look at fundraising. We talk to other speakers. We've had Ryan Zinke in, Mary Todd, Doc Al in a congressional race. We've talked to Debbie Churchill from the Montana GOP. We've talked to Don Couchschmidt. We've talked to a variety of different folks. Ronnalee Skeets from up in your neighborhood, your neck of the woods. Ronnalee is a fundraising genius, and she's helped us at a huge chunk of change from our last Lincoln Reagan dinner. So we cultivate those things. And I understand Ronnalee has some experience in the legislative world. I'm going to bring her down and have her talk to my legislative committee. So we're always looking at those things, but you have to be, number one, talking to people and actively looking for people to help you. I will also tell you this, as good as the Tiger team is, you can get burnout. It's easy to do that. You can get overwhelmed. So sometimes you need to be able to say, no, I'm not going to do that. I mean, right now, I'm the legislative committee chairman. I'm on the steering committee for the podcasts. I'm a Tiger team member, and there's something else. Oh, we're doing some stuff with the vetting. My plate's getting full. And so, am I doing as much with the fundraising? No, I'm not. But you have to find people. And when I say look for people, you need to find out what they're good at. If you have a retired banker, that may be the dude to be your treasurer. If you have somebody who is a natural born businessman or woman, that may be your fundraiser. But you got to start asking people about this stuff, figure out what they know. And quite frankly, at the risk of sounding mercenary, you got to exploit those strengths. Couple of things, and I'm not sure where we're going time-wise. So Rod, if I need to, you can cut me off. But a couple of things we need to be looking at is you need to be working on actively trying to link up with other groups. One of the reasons I want to talk to 1776 Project or Syndicate is I've got some candidates that are conservatives that are probably going to need some help with some funding. You know what? This is how you make some of those bridges, you get them built, and how you make those things happen. The other issues that we look at are that, I'm trying to think how we want to formulate this, but we basically look to try to figure out what's going to come at us down the road. We spent a significant amount of our effort addressing the districting issue that came up last year. And we were, the state was successful. The Republicans were relatively successful in fixing that dumpster fire. But we have, part of the reason we get together with the Tiger team is, while most of our people are pretty well up on things, some of us spend more time looking at that. We bring all that together, and what are the problems or the fights that are coming down the road? I didn't understand this year, but Tracy told me we've got another districting fight coming up with the congressional districts. So we're going to have to work on that. At the same time, we're getting ready to run the primaries. And we've got to find a Republican headquarters. We think we found that. And then we're going to start looking at creating and putting out some ads. We did radio ads, Tracy did last time, and they were actually relatively effective for the amount of money we spent. So I think that does a quick encapsulation of the Tiger team.
Well, Bruce, I appreciate that. I have a quick question for you. Well, I have a quick question for you on vetting, because that seems to come up quite a bit. And you had mentioned that your approach, being from the legislative committee, is if somebody doesn't seem to be voting.
I'm not getting you, Rod.
You don't. Can you hear me now?
Say that again, my friend.
Okay, so I would like you to, if you can, address the vetting. And you had mentioned if somebody's, not voting the way you had expected or what we would have thought, how you approach that.
So you want me to talk a little bit about the setting and how we vet our people?
Yes.
Okay, the setting can vary. We find, number one, a component of setting is frequency, and we meet once a week minimum. Now there's a bunch of phone calls that sometimes follow up with this, but again, we meet Wednesday morning, and that has worked well for us every week. I think in the last year we have only canceled 1 week, and that was between Christmas and New Year's. We use a local law office. There is a conference room, and there's a local Republican attorney who is willing to let us use his conference room without charge, and it's fabulous. We're just in there all the time. And the thing that's nice about it is there's a big conference table. We can use it as a workspace if necessary, and it is quiet. The other thing we do is we have significant snowbirds, folks that travel to Arizona because apparently they don't like the white sunshine that falls from the sky in Montana. And so we do a call-in procedure. Tracy had a microphone system that you can Bluetooth into a phone, and it's relatively simple to use because when he was in Germany visiting his son, I actually ran it and didn't manage to crash anything. But that allows our friends and the folks that are normally in the Tiger team in the summer to participate from Arizona and warmer climates. And people are like, well, is that really important? It is. The list of vetting questions, and I think I sent that to you, Rod. If not, I can. But that came from one of our Tiger team members who participates long distance from Arizona. So we do that. That's the setting. It can be other places. I tend to think it's best if you can do it someplace where you're not in a person's home. It's just easier than having people going in and out of a home, and the other thing we do is once a year minimum, we find a way to get a gratuity or a thank you to our host. And there's a secretary that's always helping him. So Tracy has some dude in Washington, the state of Washington, who is a high-end chocolatier. And Tracy goes out and visits him, and every time he does, he brings a box of chocolates for the secretary and for the partners. And it greases those skids. And it's a thank you. So that's sort of the setting we use. We are kicking around the idea of doing Tiger team meetings in the northern end of our county and in the southern end of our county. And the reasoning is it might help us recruit additional people. Lake County is geographically, I think, something a little bit longer than 80 miles long. We meet all the time in Polson. The problem with that is when you're in Big Fork, that's a heck of a drive. If you're in the Swan, you almost can't get there from here. Arlee's a heck of a hike. So we're thinking about taking this on the road, finding a couple of places like one up in Big Fork where the folks that come from the Swan Valley can come in and participate a little bit easier. We are not sure if we're going to do like a Zoom or a go-to meeting right now. we find that the call-in system works better. We've got our people pretty much trained to mute their mics until they're speaking, and it works pretty well. So it's minimal cost. So that's the setting we do. In answer to the concerns about vetting, and I've developed an outline and a PowerPoint presentation that documents all of this, with the idea that we'll probably be giving this to other Republican Central Committees around the state at some point. And one of the things we talked about is, who are your first people on the Tiger team? Quite frankly, it's whoever the heck you can get your hands on, if they're willing to participate. But as time goes on, you want to look for people that are dead serious, that have the time to commit to this sort of thing, and that, quite frankly, have the ability to articulate and explain their concerns. What don't you want? You don't need people that are bomb throwers that are screaming and yelling. We understand things we're in a real pickle here. We got to figure out how to fix this. Yelling and screaming doesn't do it. Productive thought does. And so we talk to our people. Because he stood it up, he and I had a couple of discussions, and that's what generated the invitation to me. And so we look at that, and here would be a good question for you guys to think about. Jim, if you were going to invite somebody to become part of the 1776 syndicate, and you had the ability to look at this, would you want to talk to them? Would you want somebody who is, boy, I want to reach across the aisle. I'm willing to vote for this Ketanji Brown character because she's Black and she'll be a great Supreme Court justice. Okay, that doesn't sound real conservative to me. And, you know, it's sort of a sharp point, and I don't mean to be touch too many third rails here, but you've got to look at that. You've got to have people that have a relatively similar mindset. You can have different approaches, but you want fairly conservative people. And the other thing I think you want to look for in people when you're vetting them is, number one, people that know how to work. You know, are these folks successful? And at the risk of causing further problems, typically retired folks have more time and are able to devote time to do these things. The problem with involving retired folks exclusively is, if you look at my Tiger team, everybody's above 50 in terms of age. We have got, if you want to have the Republic survive, you've got to get younger folks. I'm delighted to see three of our participants tonight are substantially younger than me.
Bruce,
so
I'm going to stop real quick. I know Jim was going to try and raise his hand here, but somewhere in the reactions, you can't raise your hand. So you can always type in the chat. Let me know if someone's got a question. I think you covered my questions with vetting pretty well, though. So
cool.
Jim, what was on your mind there?
Unmute. Thanks, Rod. Appreciate it. Had to unmute myself. By the way, Bruce, great comment about the precinct captains and the utilization of precincts. We've got people here from other areas, and a lot of people aren't familiar with what precinct captains do. I know in my school district over here, we're utilizing that precinct captain to know what doors to knock on. So thank you for bringing that up.
Yep.
My question for you, though, and this is more or less something that we're seeing in the Flathead, and I'm guessing that your Tiger team is eliminating this, and that is, we don't have a Tiger team, and we have a lot of groups rising up to their own elevated position of, we're going to be a vetting committee, we're going to be this, we're going to be that. And it's a lot of things popping up that I don't think is good for the party here. Are you seeing that? Has the Tiger team eliminated that? Or how would you deal with that if given that scenario? And I know we'll probably have to be brief because we don't have a ton of time.
Yeah, I'll keep it short. We have seen a little bit of that, but not much. We work extensively with Last Chance Patriots. Some of their folks are precinct captains for us, and we work more cooperatively than we do, at ever at odds with each other. The reality is the U.S. is in a two-party system. If you want to affect change, if you really want to affect change in the country, and you're conservative, you have to find a path through the Republican Party to make that happen. That's why we are devoting time and effort to fixing the precinct captains in the county. And, it doesn't seem very sexy or cool or neat, but it's starting to show dividends. I mean, I was asked to shepherd the issue through modifying our bylaws through our committee, our central committee, and did it. And it was a unanimous approval. And that is due in large part to the caliber of people we're recruiting as precinct captains. Hopefully that answers your question.
Well, I want to say that after you've gone through a lot of what you've been doing, and by the way, I didn't receive the vetting questions.
Okay, I'll get them.
If you would email those to me,
Yep.
I would love to see those, and I will make sure that those get passed on. But I think what you've mentioned tonight, just the work you're doing, can be used in anyone's campaign. What they're doing. They need to have a strategy. They need to have a plan. They need to have regular contact. They need to be going to the go-to people. They need to get plugged into those people. And then they need to know how to market and how to advertise. And then they have to be able to take constructive criticism, that after actions report. That's something I learned in the military. You've got a plan, and that planning is admitting what you've done wrong, and
Right.
learning from others. So, everything you've described for what you're actually doing in the Tiger team has ground level, grassroots effort behind it. And it takes work. And what you mentioned with the 10-80-10 is so important. And if you're spending a lot of your time with the wrong 10, you need to get with the right 10, with your campaign, the people who are going to promote you and help you run and help you work through problematic issues have to be the go-to people, not the other 10, the 10 who do nothing, or the other 80 who are just waiting to see what happens. So those are some really good things. And I wanted to mention too, this is a plug for Jim Riley, because Jim Riley is a professional podcaster. And he has a podcast, Liberty or Lose. I'll let you do your own plug for that, Jim, that I'm sure Lake County could plug into, because they're our neighbors as well. So we don't have to reinvent the wheel. And I think that's very important for all of us. So anybody else have any other questions before I turn it back to Jim to talk about the podcast portion? Because I think that is very important to get our message out there. And again, we don't have the hand raise feature, so you can even wave.
AJ, do you have a question?
Ron, I'll go ahead and talk about that podcast real quick, because John Fuller, who's on the call right now, he and I have very effectively developed a podcast for him in it's been the last 35 to 40 weeks. I don't know exactly what number we're up to, but we put a podcast out every Saturday morning about John's platform. Podcasting is not that challenging to put together, especially we're all on computers with Zoom technology. Certainly you could host a podcast. I'd be happy to help anybody learn how to do that and produce it. But the utilization that we did use the podcast for John was he talks about his platform issues and points that he would talk in a more expanded manner with people on the show. So if you have a question about the judiciary system, he can tell you in 5 minutes, what he thinks, but you could listen to a show that's 20 or 30 minutes all about those topics. So it's been a great tool for John. And Bruce, I'd be happy to connect with you and teach you how to do that or give you the tools that you need to do that. But it's just another free marketing tool that you can utilize. And I say free, it's about $25 a month to have a podcast hosting site. So it's a great creative way to reach beyond your four walls or your area of where you live and your outreach.
Jim, I'll do that. I'll get your contact stuff from Rod. We want to talk about that. We're kicking around the idea of inviting Ryan Zinke, Doc Al, Mary Todd, and there's supposed to be a fourth person, and get them into like basically a 3-hour Joe Rogan type round robin discussion to talk about the issues. But we're babes in the woods. We don't know. And I don't want to reinvent the wheel. So I'll reach out for you about it. John, for you, is this something that helps you connect with the voters better? Because we're struggling, like the old using newspapers and stuff is like 2 centuries old stuff. It just seems very slow and not very effective.
Well, Bruce, I guess the proof will be in the pudding when we get through, when we test the people voting, whatever. But we have been gradually increasing our downloads, and the personal feedback from those who've listened to it said it's been worthwhile.
All right.
And I'm amazed. Until Jim got me started on this, I not only never did one or produced one, but I never listened to one. Now I listen to them all the time. So Jim's absolutely right in terms of that it can be a very useful tool for us, and for you to have a podcast for your Tiger team would be Lake County, give it a catchy name, Lake County Tiger Team Podcast or whatever, or something like that. And hopefully, and I don't know if about downloads, I know that if they download directly from a server, their numbers are kept, but if someone sends it out on the social media to a link and then they'll download it, I'm not sure that we even know for sure how many are listening to it. So yeah, it doesn't take a whole lot of time to do it. It's something to be done to be disseminated. It's I think a good adjunct to social media.
Interesting, because we've been kicking the idea around, and we go back and forth, like using, Uncle Tracy's fireside chats, or my personal favorite is the concept of the unrepentant American, but something where we're putting the word out, because we're not communicating as well as we could be. And once the information goes out, I think we'll do better. So cool. What other questions do we have?
Well, I have a question for you about your personal business and how being a retired FBI agent with your background, and how that's developed into what you're doing, because it seems like it's tied into Second Amendment as well, tactical training, and I think that's worth a bit of discussion at this point in time.
Thanks for the opportunity, Rod. I've been shooting since I was 5 years old, and devoted a big chunk of my career to training. I was a staff instructor at the FBI Academy and the Firearms Training Unit. So it's something I've done a lot for a number of years. When I retired, I wanted to carry that into retirement. I had formed a Montana company and SA Consulting, and then I did SAC Tactical as a training division of it. And unfortunately, COVID has sort of slowed some of that down, but it's starting to ease up. Ammunition's becoming easier to acquire, and I'm in a process. I've acquired essentially what are called force-on-force training tools. They're paint marking cartridges. They look like guns, but they don't fire live ammo. We're doing syllabi. I'm doing syllabi for that, and we're starting to do more classes. I want to balance that with some of the stuff I'm doing with the Republican Party. But I've got Will Parker over in Kyla hosts me. He's gonna host me twice this year, once for a low light handgun in May, and then a 1911 build class. So if you ever wanted to build a 1911, I've got one of the top pistol smiths in the country that worked for Les Bear and ran the Bureau's FBI 1911 maintenance program. I think he's coming in December to do that. And I think I'm also on the schedule for a shotgun class in Columbia Falls in May. So it was a natural outgrowth. I love to teach and had the benefit of learning from a lot of folks, some of whom don't teach publicly. And I wanted to pass that on. I've seen, evil walks the face of the earth, and I don't want to be too dramatic about it, but I would much rather see good people prevail in bad situations. And so I try to pass some of that on when I can.
That's perfect. And thanks for that. To me, it's not just work, another job, another business, but you're passing on heritage. That's a tradition that is going to keep our country free. And I appreciate you putting that extra time in for that. And any other questions before we wrap up? Oh, there we go. AJ. Can you unmute?
Yes.
There we go.
Okay, so I'm going to be the one to ask the really newbie question, because that's what I do every time. How do I find precinct captains? Like, how do I even get into this? This is all so new to me. I'm kind of taking a crash course as I go. So
how do you find precinct captains? And so here's how you do it. First off, are you right now, or do you live or reside in a precinct that does not have a precinct captain? If yes, you need to be a precinct
I have no
captain.
clue.
Okay, and that's cool. That's all right. So how do you find this out? The Montana Code Annotated says that every precinct has to have both a male and female. They call them precinct committee man, precinct committee woman. That's such a mouthful of gibberish. We just call them precinct captains. So that should be, if you go to your county elections administrator, they should have a list of current precinct captains. They have to stand for election every 2 years. And you have to, it doesn't, as I understand, it doesn't cost anything to submit the paperwork. And I think it's due by March 14th of this year. In fact, the meeting I was supposed to be at tonight with the Republicans is we brought a notary in. We're having all of our precinct captains re-up and sign the paperwork to make it easy for them. So go talk to your election administrator. The other thing is Ronna Lee Skis is your chairman. She should have a list, because she's pretty squared away. She should have a list of who your precinct captains are. I would go get that.
Okay.
And then look through there. There's maps the county has. If you go to your GIS office, the mapping office, they will have all of that. In fact, it's probably online. It's online in Lake County, so I'm sure Flathead has it. Look at the maps, see where you are, and then you've got to start talking to people. Every time we do any sort of Republican function, like there was a pachyderm meeting, which is the Republican Men's Club last Friday. The question is, hey, anybody here interested in being a precinct captain? And you start putting out where you're missing precinct captains. We don't advertise that on the website because there is a possibility that there are Democrats that will try to take those positions. And if they literally walk into your county administrator, election administrator, and says, hey, I want to be a Republican precinct captain in whatever your precinct is, and no one runs against them, you've got a problem. And you can't dislodge them for up to 2 years unless you have another election. And we've seen there have been issues around the country where that undermines the effectiveness of the local Republican Central Committee. So check with Ronald Lee or check with your election administrator, and then start talking to people. This should be, I can't stress it enough, this should be a major push for your Central Committee to find these folks. It's really important to do that, because that's how you control politics if you want to get anything done. So does that answer your question?
Yeah,
I just want to verify
Um,
too, AJ, you are in the Flathead Valley?
she's
Yes.
in Gallatin.
I'm down in,
Okay,
I'm
in
just south
County.
of,
you're in Gallatin County.
Yep.
Okay,
And
so
I'm currently running for school board trustee, so I probably wouldn't want to put myself in another thing too. But just trying to figure out what all these terms even are. So
couple of things on those lines. There's a bunch of resources, and I suspect Mr. Fuller can talk about them better than me, but there's a bunch of resources out there that you can tap into. I would offer, if you want to jump into one of our Tiger Team meetings, to get hold of me through Rod, and we'd be more than happy to have you phone in just to see what one of them's like. So. What else?
Rod, I think we're good for the night. We're running right
I
on
think-
time.
think so. We are right there. I want to thank everybody for joining us. We're still playing around with our best times to try and meet people, and it seems like every night of the week there's something going on for somebody and something, and people with kids, it gets even worse. So Bruce, you mentioned retired people tend to be the ones who step up, and that's true. But it's just a matter of commitment. And if you're committed to being in a campaign, you're committed to moving forward, you find the time. And it's just a matter of plugging in. If it's an hour and you get one thing that can change the course of your campaign, can change the course, the direction of your own personal life or your business, you will pick something up in an hour that will make it worthwhile. And it sounds even tonight, AJ, tapping into Republican Central Committee and just getting a precinct, that is an ally. That you are not doing this alone now. You've got someone local right there that's going to help you and walk side by side and help you through the issues. And it also gives you another speaking platform. You know, if you can get up and introduce yourself at Republican Central Committee meetings and get involved in local pachyderm and even present, there are so many avenues, so many doors that open up once you're plugged in. And so getting plugged into those, I think, is really important. So Bruce, you've really shed the light on how to really get it done. I know that there are Republican Central Committees all over looking at this Tiger Team model. Ultimately, what it comes down to is people.
Right.
You know, you can talk about the systems all you want. And if you don't have people to get in there and implement those systems, you got nothing but a plan on paper. So I appreciate you stepping up and your other Tiger Team members. And I really appreciate the fact that you're willing to share that with everybody else so that we can change the direction. And at this point, it's like turning an aircraft carrier around in the Mississippi. You know, this is going to be a 75-point turn because we're way behind the gun.
Right.
And we've got the current coming down on us. So it's going to take all of our effort. And again, I appreciate all of you taking the time. This will be posted on the back end for members. It will live in posterity and people will be plugging in. And if you need to get in touch with Bruce, or Bruce, you need to get in touch with anybody else here, send us an email message. Go right on to 1776syndicate.com and we can respond to you from there. And other than that, everybody sign out. Have a great evening. And thanks again.